Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Hey, 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 hammer the fall. Here we stand, here we fall. History don't care at all. Fade to black, like the light. Lady Bush, we won't be home tonight. You don't waste no time at all. Don't hear the bell, but you answer the call. Drops to you as to us talk. And it's time for the hammer to fall. Every night, every day.
Ghost Space Patrick Henry. This is Badlands Media. Today's February 27th, 2026. How is everybody doing today? Yeah, plenty to talk about because I feel like we've kind of been stuck in a one-track mind on this show for the past few episodes, just focused on like the Iran stuff and all of that. So we'll kind of get into a few other topics. There are some updates on the Iran thing, but for now, that seems to be in a holding pattern, and hopefully that'll hold up. Let's see. Let's get the chat up here. How's the chat doing? I haven't really checked in on the chat in a while. Looks like we got a pretty lively chat. No mute. I'm not muted right now, which is good. I always have to check to make sure. Feel like I've been streaming a ton lately because we were like 6 hours of streaming yesterday with Ash, all about religious stuff, religion. It's strange to spend that much time talking about religion and politics in one day. And then I did the Badlands news brief or news blitz this morning with Ash. We recorded that for tomorrow. So anyway, what's up, guys? Chat's rocking. All right, so yeah, Cuba is definitely popping off. So let's start with Cuba, and we'll make our way. We'll get to Iran because there are a few things to update with Iran. All right, so let's bring in the share screen. And there are a few different articles here. We'll start with this people, which is a weird outlet to be reporting on this. People magazine, whatever. But we'll look at a few others too. Cuban authorities identify 7 of 10 men allegedly involved in deadly speedboat incident. The brother of one of the men killed reportedly said he'd fallen into an obsessive and diabolical pursuit for Cuban freedom. Need to know. So I guess like the fast facts here, I guess this is how People magazine does it. 4 people were killed on a speedboat and 6 others wounded by Cuban border guards after an exchange of gunfire on Wednesday, February 25th. Authorities allegedly found assault rifles, handguns, homemade explosive devices, bulletproof vests, telescopic sights, and camouflage uniforms aboard the vessel. Is it Michelle? It's either Michelle or Michael Ortega Casanova. It's an incredible name. Was identified as one of the men killed. His brother told the Associated Press that he'd fallen into an obsessive and diabolical pursuit for Cuban freedom After Cuban authorities killed 4 people and wounded 6 others aboard a Florida-based speedboat they said was bound for the country, 7 of the 10 aboard have been identified. The Interior Ministry of Cuba said in a statement that the boat was one nautical mile northeast of the El Pino channel when it was approached by a Cuban boat asking for identification on Wednesday, February 25th. The statement alleged that passengers on the speedboat opened fire at the Cuban authorities, injuring an officer in the exchange. Aboard the boat, authorities said they found assault rifles, handguns, homemade explosive devices, bulletproof vests, telescopic sights, and camouflage uniforms, per the statement. The ministry claimed the 10 armed men aboard the speedboat intended to infiltrate Cuba in order to commit terrorism. The Associated Press reported that the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. was gathering its own information and that it was trying to determine if the men who were Cubans living in Florida were American citizens or permanent residents. Quote, "We have various different elements of the U.S. government that are trying to identify elements of the story that may not be provided to us now," Rubio said, per the AP. Cuban authorities identified that Michelle Ortega Casanova has been one of 4 men killed in the exchange. Excuse me. The other 3 have not yet been identified. And I apologize, guys. I am sick. My kids have been sick for weeks, like back and forth, each one of them. And it finally caught up to me this week. So I'm going to do my best not to cough in your ear. I'll mute myself if that happens. Apologies in advance if I do. The other 3 have not yet been identified. The AP spoke to his brother, Michel. I guess it's Michelle. I guess that's how you say it. I don't know. Ortega Casanova, who said Michelle had fallen into an obsessive and diabolical pursuit toward Cuban freedom. Okay, so I'm sorry. No. The Michel is one of them. That's the guy who was killed. And then his brother is Misael. So Misael is the guy who's alive, who's being interviewed. And then the guy who died is Michel. That's wild. So Misael and Michelle, I think, is how, if I'm saying it right, I don't know. Misael? I don't know. It's a lost cause for me. I'm sorry, guys. Misael told the outlet his brother was a truck driver and an American citizen who had lived in the U.S. for 20 years and that he was married with a daughter who was pregnant. That's sad. 2 of the men wounded on the boat, Amagel Sanchez Gonzalez and Leordon Enrique Cruz Gomez, were wanted by the Cuban government for allegedly, quote, involvement in promoting, planning, organizing, financing, supporting, or carrying out acts of terrorism within the national territory or in other countries, the ministry claimed. The other 4 wounded men were identified as Conrado Galindo Serial, Jose Manuel Rodriguez Castillo, Cristian Ernesto Acosta Guevara, and Roberto Azcora Consuegra. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's People magazine, so, whatever. We'll go to the AP article now. AP from the Associated Press, Cuba says it is communicating. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger. There we go. We like that. Cuba says it is communicating with the U.S. after fatal boat shooting, but seeks more details. Cuba's deputy foreign minister said Thursday that the island's government is communicating with U.S. officials following the fatal shooting of a U.S. boat in Cuban waters. Carlos Fernandez de Cosio said the Cuban government is willing to exchange information with U.S. officials, adding that Cuba plans to ask them for information on the suspects involved and what means they use to organize the trip. The deputy foreign minister added that the U.S. government has shown willingness to cooperate in clarifying the facts. Cuba's Ministry of the Interior said that on Wednesday morning, a Florida-registered speedboat carrying 10 armed Cubans from the U.S. Opened fire on soldiers off the island's north coast, and that troops responded, killing 4 suspects and injuring 6 others. 1 Cuban official also was injured. The government said, a U.S. official said Thursday that at least 1 American citizen was killed and another wounded in the incident. The official, who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the ongoing investigation into Wednesday's firefight, said another member of the 10-person crew was in the U.S. on a visa and several others had been green card holders. Okay, so, and I think there's one other article. Maybe it's worth just glancing at this one. This is from The Guardian. Cuba vows to fight, quote-unquote, terrorist aggression after attack from U.S. registered boat. Cuban president says country will defend itself with determination after deadly coastal assault by exiles. Cuba has vowed to defend itself against any terrorism or terrorist and mercenary aggression a day after border guards said they had killed 4 exiles on a Florida registered speedboat that opened fire on a patrol. Cuba's president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, wrote on X that the Caribbean country would defend itself with determination and firmness after the incident in which 6 other people on the boat were injured. The incident has the potential to crank up tensions between Washington and Havana, which have been heightened since U.S. forces seized Cuba's key ally, the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, and the Trump administration imposed an oil blockade on the island in January. But talks between the two countries are understood to be continuing, and both governments appeared keen to calm the situation. Diaz-Canel preceded his comments by writing, quote, "Cuba does not attack nor threaten." On Thursday, the Miami Herald reported that U.S. officials had met former Cuban President Raul Castro's grandson on the sidelines of CARICOM, the annual meeting of Caribbean leaders in St. Kitts and Nevis. Raul Guillermo Rodriguez Castro, 41, does not have an official role in the Cuban government, but remains close to his grandfather, who holds huge sway in the country's power structure. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who was attending the CARICOM session, said the U.S. government had nothing to do with the incident and told reporters we're still gathering facts. But what facts there are remain sketchy. The assault happened among a network of keys east of the tourist beach of Veradero off the island's northern coast, according to Cuba's Ministry of the Interior. The boat, a small center console speedboat, appears to have come from the Florida Keys and was allegedly carrying arms. One of the men died, Michelle Ortega Casanova. One of the men who died, Michelle Ortega Casanova, had spoken of wanting to liberate the island. An associate told AFP, quote, his goal was to go and fight against a criminal and murderous narco-tyrannical government to see if that would spark the people to rise up, said Wilfredo Beira, head of the Cuban Republican Party in Tampa. There is a long history of exiles trying to spark uprisings against Cuba's communist government. Cuban authorities said the occupants fired on the border guards when they were intercepted, injuring the Cuban commander and one guard. The Ministry of the Interior said it had already picked up one further member of the group who had flown to the island to meet the boat and who had, quote unquote, confessed. The boat appears to have been a 24-foot pro line, usually used to fish in coastal waterways, and may have been stolen. To experts, it seems an unlikely craft to attempt a seaborne landing on Cuba, more than 90 miles away from Florida, given that the 10 occupants would have been a tight fit and the boat did not have a particularly powerful engine. The Cuban authorities say the survivors were all Cuban residents in the U.S. who now stand accused of intending to carry out an infiltration for the purposes of terrorism. The ministry also said that they all had criminal records in Cuba and were carrying assault rifles, handguns, Molotov cocktails, and other military-style gear. A U.S. official said at least 2 individuals were U.S. citizens, including one of the dead, and a third person who was on a K-1 visa, which allows spouses of citizens to settle in the U.S. Several of the injured were apparently being held at a hospital in Santa Clara, about 150 miles east of Havana, which was under heavy guard by Interior Ministry troops. Reuters reported, quote, there is a lot of Sturm und Drang over this in Miami. What does that mean? Sturm und Drang? It sounds like a German thing. Let me look this up because this is piqued my interest. This is, according to Wikipedia, it is a proto-romantic movement in German literature and music that occurred between the 1760s and 1780s. Within the movement, individual subjectivity and in particular extremes of emotion were given free expression in reaction to the perceived constraints of rationalism imposed by the Enlightenment and associated aesthetic movements. Okay. I don't know what that really means. Is that supposed to mean that it's like to be really emotional? Is that what that means? Hold on. Let me just run this down. Meaning. Yeah, it sounds like it's like dramatic, intense emotion, dramatic action. Okay. Yeah, we get it. said a leading figure in the exile community. There are also concerns among some exiles that U.S. efforts at regime change will be damaged by such a freelance attack. There are some corners of the Cuban exile community declaring 2 days of mourning, said Michael Bustamante, the chair of Cuban and Cuban-American studies at the University of Miami. But I've also seen a lot of commentary sarcastically asking, what the hell were these guys thinking? Yeah, I would be one of those voices asking that. Quote, there is a feeling that at the moment the U.S. is clamping down and putting the Cuban government in the corner. This could actually give the Cuban government a lifeline. Bustamante said, quote, a maritime raid is how the Cuban revolution got started. The Grandma, the boat that carried Fidel and Raul Castro, as well as Che Guevara and 79 others from Mexico in 1956, now sits in open display at Havana's Museum of the Revolution. Okay, so like let's start to dig into this. There's a few other things I'm going to look at, but before we get there, like let's talk about the high level of what this is, because on its surface, what this looks like, it could be one of two things. Assuming that these facts that we're being given are true or accurate, and for the time being, I'm just going to take it all at face value um, until we have reason otherwise to believe that we're being lied to by some of these authorities. A boat with 10 guys who are all Cuban, 2 of whom are U.S. citizens. The other ones all have visas. They're all living in South Florida. Sounds like they all have criminal records, or most of them have criminal records in Cuba. They're all Cuban exiles. At least one of them is like hardcore about liberating Cuba from the government. And they think that if they go and they do this armed to the teeth and start, conducting terrorist activities, I guess, on Cuban soil, the people will join in and rise up. So let's just assume for like this first take, the first pass, that this isn't like a CIA intelligence operation, which frankly, like I know that we often do attribute a lot of these kind of activities to that stuff, to that like element. But given like how absurd this story is, I'm a little inclined to like actually give the CIA the benefit of the doubt here. And maybe that's naive. Maybe I'm wrong to do that. But it seems like if the CIA were going to do this, they would go about it in a very, very different way. Like they wouldn't be recruiting Bubba and Cletus, so to speak, or the Hispanic versions of Bubba and Cletus from the Cuban trailer park in southern Florida to go get all of their drinking buddies and hop on a 24-foot center console and take that thing across the Gulf of Mexico, 90 miles, which is a very, very, very long distance to go on a 24-foot center console, and try to invade Cuba. That seems like that would be really, really like these guys are going to die. Like there's just no way these guys are going to make it. This is a perfect example. Let's just assume that these guys all did this on their own because they were thinking that like this is a perfect example of why the lies that we're told by the media are so dangerous. Because whatever these guys really were and whatever their motives really were, like what we're being told by the brother and by the Republican Party, like the Republican Party of Tampa and whatever, is that these guys actually thought that they could start a revolution with guns. Probably because they have been told their whole life that the Cuban government is evil. The Cuban government is our enemy. The Cuban government needs to be destroyed. The Cuban government needs to be whatever, right? And now there have been some narratives that we're going to get into here in a minute over the past few weeks of what's been happening with the Cuban government. And because of the lies that are told in our media, not only by the media, but also by like the Republican Party, by certain members of the Trump administration, like people who I don't think everyone in the Trump administration, by the way, is like an earnest good actor. I think there are bad actors in the Trump administration. We know for a fact that there were bad actors from the first Trump administration. John Bolton has been arrested by the current Trump administration, right? So we know for a fact that there were people in the first Trump administration who were bad actors, and yet Trump still let him in the administration, right? I don't think it's because Trump's a bad guy. I don't think it's because Trump is a fool. I think it's because Trump let them in on purpose to catch them. And John Bolton has been arrested for stealing classified information. That's what he was arrested for. So again, like, there's a reason that you would let bad actors into your camp if you felt fully secured that you were like in control of the whole situation so that you could like monitor them, analyze their activity, observe them, etc. Maybe bait them into doing certain things that expose them. This is why this rhetoric is so dangerous, guys. Like, when we tell lies about the way things are, and look, what is the Cuban government really like? I don't know. I've never been to Cuba. So I don't know. Okay. But when the media pounds us with 24/7, inundates us with psyop, like Venezuela evil, Venezuela evil, Venezuela evil, Venezuela evil, Venezuela evil, Venezuela evil. It's like, yeah, everyone in America thinks Venezuela is evil. Everyone in America thinks that Maduro is evil. Now, Venezuela is a little too far away to hop in a boat and go like invade Venezuela. But if it was 90 miles away, maybe somebody would have, right? So I kind of blame, these guys are responsible for their own actions. I believe in that. I believe that like everyone's accountable for their own actions. But it sounds like they're all kind of brainwashed. They were all brainwashed to think that, their only hope of liberating Cuba, which I don't understand why that was even a priority for them if they're living in America, could only be achieved by hopping in their fishing boat and invading Cuba with guns. I mean, it just is retarded. And I have a real disdain for liars. I have a real disdain for the people who tell us lies, including primarily the people in the Republican Party. And Ash and I, as I said, we just recorded the news blitz, and Ash had like a long take on that. And when she finished her take, as I said, do we hate politicians? Chat, answer me this. Is it fair to say that we hate politicians who lie to us? Is it a fair thing to say that? Yes, right? So using that logic, would it be fair to say that if we in the truth community are lying to the normies or like influencers online that we like and respect or whatever, are lying to the normies in order to quote unquote wake them up, right, for their own good, because the truth might be too much for them to handle? If those normies figure out that they've been lied to by us or the influencers or whatever, or the Trump administration, is it fair for them to hate us too? Yeah, I certainly would. Are we any better than the people we're trying to replace? Are we any better than the people we're trying to overthrow? No, we're not. Now, as I've always said, I give the president a special consideration because he is surrounded by devils. He's surrounded by some of the most evil people who've ever lived, in my opinion, going back 10,000 years. The most evil people who've ever lived, I think, are alive right now. And I think many of them are in very close proximity to President Trump, either physically in DC or maybe tangentially, like through like a connection to him, right? And I think President Trump's okay with having them in his proximity because he feels safe and secure. And it's a keep your friends close, but your enemies closer mentality. So he has to engage in deception, I think, all the time because he has really, really bad people in his proximity who are trying to push him to do things that would be terrible for the world. One of those things being start a war with Iran, which would absolutely be World War III, which would destroy civilizations. It would kill millions of people. It would change world history forever. And yet he's being pushed into that by these devils. So I give Trump grace when it comes to what he says, what he does, how he operates. I don't extend that grace to anybody else. I don't care who they are. Because I think everybody else, the impetus is on them to tell the truth at all times. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. Okay? Does that mean that like the people in the administration have to come out and be transparent about every little thing they're doing? No. But don't come out and tell us that the sky is red and that the grass is blue and that, cats are dogs and dogs are cats and men are women and women are men because you're trying to wake up the normies. That's bullshit. It's bullshit. It's never okay to tell overt lies like that in order to achieve an end. And it's always immoral to do it. So you're never going to convince me that lying to people is for their own good. If you're telling me that, then I'm just going to assume that you're working for Satan. Um, so we will learn what happened with these guys in due time. I believe. Let me say. Let me rephrase that. I, if the facts as presented to us right now hold, and we don't learn, that these guys were connected to like USAID or some, opt into doing this. I think these guys were psyoped into doing this by the media, by the Republican Party, by you know, the Republican Party in South Florida, as I understand it, is extremely like you talk about the deep state, you talk about the neocons, talking to various people who would know these things better than I do because I don't track the Republican Party like that closely. Uh, the Republican Party in South Florida is like one of the strongest, most powerful like wings of the party. It has an enormous Hispanic contingent, refugees from different countries. Cuba, I think, is the biggest one, but Venezuela, Colombia, all these places. They all have like a chip on their shoulder because of where they came from. Like they all want to overthrow the government of the place they came from. And I think it's notable that like a lot of these guys who were on this boat had criminal records. Now, if they came from a place that was actually being run by like a draconian authority, like an evil government, and they're charged with a crime, that doesn't necessarily mean they're actually criminals. They could have been wrongfully charged. I get that. However, I've also seen a lot of evidence that like Nicolas Maduro was rounding up and arresting and charging people who were actually criminals, who were actually doing really bad things, and almost all of them left the country, fled the country. And then they went to places like Spain where they joined the chorus of voices of Venezuelan dissidents, and then people like General Flynn and the Republican establishment have trotted them out. These are like officials from the Maduro government who have been accused of being traitors and corrupt officials by Maduro, and they come walking out and they're talking about how evil Maduro is and all that. And it's like, yeah, I would expect you to say that because apparently you were like embezzling and stealing money from Venezuela and Maduro was going to throw you in prison. So you fled the country. So I fully expect you to say that Maduro is evil and that you want to see him overthrown because if he's not overthrown, your ass is going to jail. Um, so again, I just really, really, really despise liars. I really despise these people who have told us so many lies for decades, for generations. I'm sick of the lies. I want the lies to stop. I want us just to engage in truth. Um, and so we should stop rewarding people who lie for a living. We should stop doing it. For all the deception that Donald Trump, I think, engages in, I think he tells way more truth than he does deception. I think he highlights and spotlights and brings sunlight to way more stuff than he does, like, doing the kayfabe and the deception and stuff. He does that strategically. But for the most part, he's bringing attention to things that have never received attention before. So I look at it like that. Now, let's pull up a map because I want to see where this place is. And then we'll pull up some of these older articles from this Cuba thing's been unfolding for a few weeks. And we haven't got a chance to really cover it because we have been focused, our attention has been focused elsewhere. All right, so they're saying Veradero. Let me pull up the map. Okay, so here's Cuba. And so they're saying it's these key islands that are right here. So Veradero is like this peninsula right here. And so here's all those little islands they were talking about. And if I go back and I look at that Guardian article seemed to have the most information. That doesn't mean it's all accurate, but um let's see. It says the boat was intercepted at Veradero. Yeah, so it says the assault happened among a network of keys east of the tourist beach of Veradero off the island's northern coast, according. Okay, so they're saying that it happened somewhere around here. So here's the Veradero beach right there. Here are the keys that are east of that. White keys right here, Cayos Blancos. See, I speak a little bit of Spanish. Enough to be dangerous. Cayo Macho. So somewhere around here is where the boat was intercepted. So these guys didn't even make it to like the mainland. They were gonna like land at one of these little islands. Yeah, this whole thing sounds retarded. But again, we've seen this play out. We've seen this play out in Venezuela. We've seen multiple failed amphibious operations over the past 5 or 6 years in Venezuela. However, the difference is in those situations, the guys were like former Green Berets, they were former special forces, they were like actual mercenaries. These guys, again, sound like they're just a bunch of beer drinking Cubans who are just looking to get rowdy, So all right, well, let's pull up. I want to pull up let's see. Where was that article? It was before I get to Trump's comments today, because I'm aware of all that. I want to pull up the article from give me one second. It's Rubio and Raul Castro negotiation. Yeah, I know I have it on my Telegram. While we're waiting for that to pull up, I will go ahead and pull Trump's comments right here.
Cuba right, well, Cuba's doing very badly. They're failing. Cuba right now is, to put it mildly, a failing nation. And I've been hearing about Cuba. I said before, since I'm a little boy, I've been hearing about Cuba, and everybody wanted to change. And I can see that happening. Marco Rubio is dealing on it, and at a very high level. And, they have no money, they have no oil, they have no food. And it's really right now a nation in deep trouble, and they want our help.
All right, so here's the article I was looking for. And I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, chat. I can't remember if we went through this when it first came out. We may have. If we did, I apologize. But let's go back and look at it again. This is from Mark Caputo, who is part of like the Bannon War Room Network. I will say that Caputo has been like shilling for war with Iran, so disappointed to see that. But many such cases, man. People are just going to expose who they are. So yeah, we did go through this because I remember reading about El Cangrejo, which is the crab, is the guy's name, right? But what's interesting is that the way that like these other articles and the way the mainstream narrative is going, and this is why I just have no patience for the liars, man. The liars have gotten on my last nerve, and I just want to see them all face consequences in like the most severe way imaginable. Because we're being told constantly that Cuba is about to be overthrown. The Republicans are all like giddy about it. They're all like super excited. We're going to go start a war with Cuba. They seem like super eager to have a 7-front war, just like Netanyahu has done with Israel, which has been a complete and total failure for the IDF. And yet this article breaks. This is from 9 days ago, February 18th. And it says, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the headline is exclusive, Rubio's secret squeeze on Raul Castro's Cuba. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been holding secret talks with the grandson and caretaker of Cuba's aging de facto dictator, Raul Castro, as the U.S. puts unprecedented pressure on Havana's regime. 3 sources tell Axios. The talks between Rubio and Raul Castro are bypassing official Cuban government channels. By the way, that's notable because that follows a pattern of behavior that we've seen with Maduro. That happened with Maduro, where you had Rick Grinnell going and meeting like off the record with I think he met with Jorge Rodriguez. Then you had Eric. This was during the first Trump administration. Then you had Eric Prince going and meeting with Delcy Rodriguez off the record, right? Secretly. You had off the record communications between Jared Kushner and MBS, the Saudi crown prince, right after Trump got in, or right before Trump entered office after he won the first election in 2016. So this is like a thing that consistently seems to happen. And my takeaway from it is that Trump doesn't trust the State Department, because being less familiar with, this specific narrative and less familiar with the Rodriguez meetings, the meetings with the Rodriguez siblings, but more familiar with like the MBS Kushner dynamic. The MBS Kushner dynamic, where they were texting one another. They had gotten each other's cell phone numbers from the Emiratis through via Tom Barrack, who had kind of set up all. He's the one who introduced everybody, and everybody on all sides thought it was a good idea for Kushner and MBS, because they were about the same age, to become friends, to ingratiate one another, because that represented, they were peers. And so they started communicating on WhatsApp, text messaging, and the State Department found out and flipped out. It was basically like, this is a national security issue. You can't communicate with the defense minister from Saudi Arabia behind our back. You need to do this through official channels. And basically what they were saying is that we need to be able to monitor your communications. And Kushner kept doing it, and that irritated the State Department even more. You then subsequently after that had the Pegasus software, which was created by an Israeli software company called the NSO Group. The NSO Group is being sued by WhatsApp because they were caught hacking into, I think it was like 1,500, but it was thousands of private chats, right? And my guess is that these private chats are probably of like important people. I doubt it's just, mom and pop. But I can't help but wonder if there's a relationship there. If like the State Department saw Kushner and MBS and maybe others using WhatsApp to circumvent them, and so then they go to the NSO Group with the Pegasus software, which they, by the way, are licensed to use, as is pretty much every government in the world at this point. They pay like I'm sure it's like a subscription, like a monthly fee or whatever, yearly fee, whatever it is. They pay a fee to the Israeli government and to the NSO Group to use the Pegasus software. And the Pegasus software, by the way, is the software that allows governments to tap into your cell phone, to turn on your microphone, to turn on your camera, to track all your keystrokes, to violate your privacy in every sense of the word. That's Pegasus. And I can't help but wonder if there's a relationship between those two things, between Kushner and MBS's conversations, and then the fact that NSO Group figured out how to hack into WhatsApp, which is supposed to be like an encrypted software. It's supposed to be, private communication, which is why WhatsApp sued them. All of this is related, and in my opinion, and I think ultimately my takeaway is that Trump doesn't trust the State Department. I wouldn't trust the State Department. I think the State Department is completely irredeemable. I think it's going to need to be completely abolished and completely replaced with something new. It's just, there's too much poisonous fruit that's come out of the State Department. It is a poisonous apple tree, and we can't keep watering it and thinking it's going to bear healthy fruit. So just skimming through this article a little further. Let's see. Rubio and his team see the 41-year-old grandson in his circle as representing younger business-minded Cubans for whom revolutionary communism has failed. and who see value in reapproachment with the U.S. Our position, the U.S. government's position, is that the regime has to go. The senior official said, but what exactly that looks like is up to Trump, and he has yet to decide. Rubio is still in talks with the grandson. So the grandson's name is Raulito, and his nickname is El Cangrejo, which is the crab, because apparently he has a deformed finger. That's seems a little cartoonish, but okay, I'll allow it. I'll allow it. I appreciate the fact that he has a Trumpomania name. We'll go ahead and give him that. I'm gonna need a picture of the deformed finger, though. If I'm going to accept his name, I need to see the finger. As gross as it may be, I got to see the finger. It says, after 67 years of U.S. sanctions, the totalitarian government appears closer than ever to collapse. It teeters on the edge of a humanitarian crisis. This is what the Republicans are all cheering about. I don't know why we would be cheering that, but apparently we are. It's amazing to me that we create humanitarian crises by imposing these crippling sanctions, which, in the case of Venezuela, we weren't allowing food to enter Venezuela. Like Alex Saab was arrested because he was facilitating illegal food deliveries from Iran and other places into Venezuela. I don't know, man. Like, call me crazy, but there's something very evil about that. Like, I just think that there's something that's like incredibly cruel that you're not going to allow food deliveries into a country. Like, I don't know, because you think that if you starve everybody there, maybe that'll accelerate the collapse of the government. Yeah, I just think that we're going to be judged very harshly by our children, and I think we deserve all the condemnation that's coming our way. We probably deserve it. It says the power grid is failing. Hospitals are limiting surgeries. Food and fuel are increasingly scarce. Tourism is drying up. Uncollected garbage is piling up on some street corners. The troubles accelerated after Trump ordered the January 3rd abduction and extradition of Venezuela's indicted socialist strongman, Nicolas Maduro, who essentially supplied free oil to Cuba. Trump threatened sanctions on the island's other large oil supplier, Mexico. The U.S. military success and technical superiority in the Maduro operation shook Cuba's leadership after American forces suffered no losses and killed at least 32 Cuban intelligence and military officials who were supposed to be guarding Maduro. And then it's just jumping through. It says they're looking for the next Delcy in Cuba, referring to the deal that they cut with Delcy Rodriguez to take over from Maduro. She, by the way, continues to say that Maduro is still president. And then it says Trump advisors have spoken with other influential Cubans besides the younger Castro, but he's seen as the most important figure on the island to cultivate. Quote, he's the apple of his grandfather's eye, served as the dictator's bodyguard, and also has allies running the mammoth military business conglomerate known as Gaisa, said one source who described the Rubio-Castro conversations as surprisingly friendly. There's no political diatribes about the past. It's about the future, the source said. That's a smart way to approach it, noting their common Cuban heritage and accents that are the lingua franca of Miami and surrounding cities, rather. So then you have that dynamic. You have it's very notable, by the way, that Rubio and Raulito are speaking outside of State Department channels, because that does actually give a incentive, that kind of gives a motive to the CIA to do something like this, even if it is just them going and finding some drunk Cubans in South Florida and saying, hey, here's some guns, go shoot up that island. That does kind of give them incentive to do that. Like, if they feel like that they're losing control over the situation and they somehow do have had control over the situation, and I think to some extent they probably have over the past 70 years. That's certainly notable, because we also have, we have this news article about Mexico bringing fuel to Cuba. Okay, so here is Reuters from February 5th. And it says, exclusive, Mexico seeking ways to send fuel to Cuba without being hit by U.S. tariffs, sources say. So Mexico is trying, officials are evaluating how to send fuel to Cuba to help meet basic needs such as electricity and transportation without triggering reprisals from Washington, which has threatened tariffs against countries supplying fuel to the Caribbean island, four sources familiar with the matter say. Okay, so there's that. Then we have, that's February 5th. Then we have 3 days later, February 8th, we have this article from Bloomberg that says Mexico confirms it won't ship any more oil to fuel-starved Cuba. So this is, again, like 3 weeks ago. And it says Mexico has halted all of its oil shipments to Cuba, given Donald Trump's tariff threat, its president acknowledged, while pledging to continue sending humanitarian aid to the struggling Caribbean island. It's, quote, it's currently on hold, and we are seeking to avoid any negative impact on Mexico, and as always, to find the best diplomatic solution for Cuba to receive the fuel. That was President Claudia Sheinbaum. Okay. Then we have this from 2 days ago. U.S. to allow resale of Venezuelan oil to Cuba's private sector, Treasury says. So it's not going to be Mexican oil. It's going to be Venezuelan oil. The U.S. Treasury Department said on Wednesday it would authorize companies seeking licenses to resell Venezuelan oil to Cuba's private sector, according to guidance posted on the department's website, a move that could help ease the island's acute fuel scarcity since Washington took control of Venezuela's oil exports in January in the aftermath of the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The South American country's supply to Cuba has ceased, worsening in their energy crisis in the communist-run country that is hitting power generation and fuel for vehicles, houses, and aviation. Venezuela has been for more than 25 years the main supplier of crude and fuel to its political ally Cuba through a bilateral pact mostly based on the barter of products and services. Mexico, which had emerged as an alternate supplier, also halted shipments to this Caribbean island since a fuel cargo arrived in Havana in January, according to shipping data. Excuse me. Yeah, it also mentions here the trading houses Vitol and Trafigura are now handling the lion's share of Venezuela's oil exports, with millions of barrels exported to the U.S., Europe, and India. Okay, so there's that. And so Trump is now letting Venezuelan oil go, but to go to Cuba, right? Then you have today's news. Trump raises prospect of a friendly takeover of Cuba. This kind of is related to the comments we just were hearing Trump make. U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday raised the prospect of a quote-unquote friendly takeover of Cuba, telling reporters at the White House that Secretary of State Marco Rubio was dealing with the issue at a very high level. Quote, the Cuban government is talking with us, and they're in a big deal of trouble, Trump said as he left the White House for a trip to Texas. They have no money. They have no anything right now, but they're talking with us, and maybe we'll have a friendly takeover of Cuba. So again, like going back to what I was saying earlier about kayfabe and deception and like making that special exception for Trump to engage in this kind of behavior while basically condemning everybody else who does it. This article right here, Axios, explains here at the bottom that right here, as in Venezuela, analysts say they expect Trump could leave some officials in power in Cuba and not seek a wholesale regime change because of memories of a disastrous de-Baathification after the 2003 invasion of Iraq. They're referring to throwing out the Ba'ath Party, which is the Saddam Hussein ruling party in Iraq, and replacing it with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all them. It says some Castro family members, including Raul Castro, might not be forced into exile under a deal with Trump, which would outrage Cuban exiles in Miami. And that last part, guys, is the key. That is the key part right there, which would outrage Cuban exiles in Miami. So remember, in South Florida, there is a massive massive Hispanic Republican neocon contingent. Do you remember who nominated Maria Corina Machado for the Nobel Peace Prize? Right? Nobel nomination. I think I have it right here. Here it is. Oh, wait, no, that's not it. It's right. That's her letter to Netanyahu. The people who nominated Maria Corina Machado, who is a known CIA, like she's a CIA puppet. There's no doubt about that in my mind, that she is a CIA puppet. And I don't know why the algorithm would be burying this letter. That seems a little sketchy to me. Here it is. Look at that. Look at that. We can find it. It was Rick Scott. He's a gringo. He's white. Marco Rubio. He's Cuban. Representative Maria Diaz Balart. I'm sorry, Mario Diaz Bart. I think that guy is from, where is he from? I mean, he's Hispanic. He says he was born in Florida, but is he the child of? Oh, yep, Cuban. He is a member of the Diaz. Look at this. So this is the third name on that list. Diaz Balart family. His aunt Mirta Diaz Balart was the first wife of Cuban President Fidel Castro. Her son and his cousin was Fidel Ángel Fidelito Castro Diaz Balart. His uncle was the Cuban Spanish painter Waldo Diaz Balart. His brother, Lincoln Diaz Balart. So this guy is like the nephew, the grandson, something like that, of Fidel Castro. I mean, is it like a stretch to think that maybe this is the black sheep of the family? Like maybe these people went into exile because, I don't know, they pissed off the wrong people in the family and they were excommunicated or whatever, right? I mean, every family, or a lot of families, I should say, that are in like power centers have black sheep. Like they have the people who want power but can't get it, right? And what often happens in the stories, whether you're talking about history or fiction, is that the black sheep who isn't allowed to have power, like the son, like who isn't in line to be king, what does he do? He kills the prince so he can become king, right? Is it possible that maybe this guy wants to overthrow the Cuban government so that his family can become the leaders of Cuba? Is it possible? Maybe. I don't know, but certainly his motive. Who benefits? That's what murder detectives ask whenever they find a dead body. The first question: who benefits? When you're investigating a crime, who benefits? I mean, I didn't even know that, guys. I just pulled this guy's Wikipedia up. I have no idea who this guy is. I'm amazed to find that out. The fourth person on this letter to nominate Maria Corina Machado for the Nobel Peace Prize, this is in August of 2024, is Maria Elvira Salazar. Now, I am familiar with her. And Maria, whatever Salazar, she's definitely a spicy Latina who likes to run her mouth about, starting wars and all that. She loves to talk about war. She was the one out there really being like, man, we are going to go to war with Venezuela. She was convinced. Oh, she's Cuban too. Look at that. Spent part of her childhood in Puerto Rico. So all these people are from Cuba. All these Republicans are from Cuba. That's really, really notable to me. The fact that these people are all from Cuba. They all have a lot of power and clout now in the U.S. government, and they have an axe to grind with their homeland. And they want to use, she was born in Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, the daughter of Cuban exiles. She grew up bilingual, speaking both Spanish and English. She spent part of her childhood in Puerto Rico. So look, let's just take Because she interviewed several people, including, okay, whatever, Pablo Escobar, doesn't matter. Let's just take everything at face value and let's just assume, let's give these people the biggest benefit of the doubt that we possibly can. And let's assume that their parents were actually persecuted. They actually are refugees. They actually were like suffering at the hands of really, really bad people. Let's just, for like the sake of argument, let's just accept all of those, that entire premise is real. That this actually happened, that her parents had to flee Cuba, that her parents had to whatever. Why is that like my problem as an American? Why is it my responsibility to go liberate your island that you came from? Like why do we have to go liberate your island for you? Like I'm sorry that a ruthless dictator lives on your island that you came from. Sounds like y'all got to come here and start a life. Sounds like you got to come here and become Americans. So why don't you close the book on that chapter of your life and open the book on your new life here in America and let bygones be bygones? Why do we have to go back and start a war with those people? We don't, but apparently we do, because the Republican apparatus is using this as like the bludgeoning tool against these different governments across the Caribbean. And you got to wonder, like, the interests of these Cuban exiles overlapping with the interests of the CIA, of the Zionists who hate, guys like Maduro and Hugo Chavez and Gustavo Petro. I'm pretty sure Fidel Castro, I'm almost positive Fidel Castro was anti-Israel and like pro-Palestine. So do you think that there's like overlapping interest there, that like Mark Levin and Laura Loomer are going to see Elvira Salazar and that other guy, the Diaz Balart, as allies? Like, oh yeah, like we should all work together to start a war with Cuba, to start a war with Venezuela, to start a war with Palestine, to start a war with Iran. Yeah. So who knows? Maybe those guys were put on that boat by the CIA. Maybe they just did it on their own because they were psyoped by the news, or maybe they were put up to it by the Republican Party of South Florida, these Cuban exiles, because the Cuban exiles saw something happening where they had no control over the outcome. They saw that Rubio was negotiating with Raulito Castro using back channels off the radar of beyond the control of the State Department, and that it looked like they were going to allow the Castro family to remain in power and not go into exile, and they didn't find that acceptable. So they're going to do everything they can to stop that from happening. And one way to do that is to arm a bunch of American citizens, Cuban Americans, send them over there and get them to engage in acts of terrorism. That certainly is going to stop, diplomacy. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying it's a theory. And it's a theory that I think maps on to the narrative that we're at least being told. We don't know exactly what's happening here. We're kind of like speculating because it's early in this storyline, but makes sense to me. But again, at what point do we stop being the world's police? At what point do we say America first? America first. We have our own problems we have to focus on. Let Cuba figure out Cuba. Let Venezuela figure out Venezuela. Let Israel figure out Israel. Iran figure out Iran. We're going to figure out America. All right. Maybe there'll be opportunities for us to work together. Maybe. But it's not our priority. Our priority is fixing our own problems. That is totally unacceptable, by the way, to that Cuban contingent in South Florida, because they think that there is a moral responsibility, a prerogative, an imperative of the American taxpayer to pay for a kinetic military intervention against all these different countries in Latin America. A revenge tour, so to speak. No, thank you. No, thank you. We're good. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back and we will Geopolitics with Ghosts.
What up, Badlanders? Are you ready to rock something new in 2026? Well, as always, we got you covered with the Rise Badlands Native Collection. Built from the rich tones and rugged terrain of the Dakotas, equal parts beautiful and brutal. Old roots, new vibe. Whether you got gators in your backyard or you have to take a bush plane to the post office, Badlanders are worldwide. Different dirt, same tribe. By the way, your friends at Rise have a deal for you. Show up at GART rocking your native gear, swing by our booth, and get in to win a free Badlands Rise hoodie of your choice. And don't forget, every order throws fuel on the fire of the Made in USA parallel economy. So grab something now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, My Pillow mattresses and My Pillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets, regular $69.98. Now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
In a quiet town at where beards grow wild and lips dare to crack without permission, one woman has suffered.
Hi, I'm Margie, and I'm Jadriet's mother.
But the world would come to know her by another name, Madame Margie, the moistureless.
Jay came home with a lip balm. It's called Soft Disclosure.
With one miraculous application, her power awakened.
Within one day, my lips were healed. It was miraculous.
But salvation came at a cost. For in the shadowed lands known only as Badlands,
You boys at Badlands are so handsome.
she saw potential.
You're covering up your beautiful faces.
And she made her demand,
Shave them all off,
or face the consequences. Beard oil will not save you now.
and you'll look so much better.
This summer, moisturize wisely and guard your beard, because Madame Margie, the moistureless, is always watching.
All right, guys, welcome back to Geopolitics Ghost. This is the hour. Today is February 27th, 2026. Happy Friday. I'm your host, Gordon McCormick, the ghost of bass Patrick Henry. And welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. Please hit the thumbs up. Share it if you can. And I wanted to give two shout outs, or two shout outs. The first being to our friend Jordan Sather from Conscious Strength. And Maha yourself with supplements that don't suck from Conscious Strength, founded by Badlands' very own Jordan Sather in 2019. Conscious Strength products are made in America and won't break your bank, unlike other online brands. Their lineup includes collagen for strengthening joints and hair, electrolytes to get rid of those cramps, greens powders that taste good and mix is easy, Shilajit gummies, methylene blue, zeolite, and more. Flip the finger to pharma, be your own doctor, and get supplements that you can trust from Conscious Strength. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/strength and to shop now. One more time, it's badlandsmedia.tv/strength. And the link will be provided in the description of the show. Yeah, I would encourage people to reach out to Jordan. He is really knowledgeable when it comes to all that stuff. I always appreciate people who just know everything there is to know. I mean, and that's a relative term, but who are very passionate about what they do and just know a lot about the subject that they are engaged in, like from a entrepreneur standpoint. So Jordan is one of those people, and I would encourage y'all to reach out to him. And he can educate you on the products, educate you on the subject matter. So yeah, Conscious Strength. And then the other one is GART. So GART 11 is coming up. We are going to Nashville, Tennessee. Pretty good lineup here, as you can see on your screen. Jonathan Drake. We're gonna have Jonathan Drake there with us. Matt Trump, Josh Reed, right? And then all the other usual suspects. This is going to be from April 9th to April 12th. So go ahead and get your tickets today, badlandsmedia.tv/events, for your in-person tickets or your virtual tickets. The tickets are as cheap as they're going to be right now. I do know that ticket prices for the virtual, I believe, are going to increase at some point. I don't know what the exact date is. I think that's probably on the website. Forgive me for not having that information. Let me see if it's in here in the... Oh, wait. Here it is. It is. It's in the ad read. I was just doing this off the cuff. It says, grab them at a special early bird price between now and March 15th. After that, the regular price of $40 kicks in. So visit badlandsmedia.tv/events to snag the lowest price for the virtual tickets. All right. So let's get back to the show. So from there, let's see. So we last hour we were talking about Cuba, and I believe we talked about Mexico, at least somewhat, on Tuesday, right? We talked about all the craziness that was going on down there with these drug cartels. But it really seems like we've actually been working with Mexico on this for at least a year. That's what Pam Bondi said. That's pretty crazy. Again, like this is just a perfect example of like the deception. So the point that I was making, I don't know if I finished making that point towards the end of the first hour, was that so why would Trump need to engage in deception? Well, if this massive wing of the Republican Party, this Hispanic neocon contingent, which is absolutely bloodthirsty for war with their former countries, Cuba being the largest contingent, I think, but there's also Venezuelans, there's Colombians, etc. You're tangoing with these people and you're trying to keep them from bringing the entire Republican Party. The entire Republican Party is like hell bent on war. They love war. It's what gets them out of bed in the morning. It's just been the case for decades. How do you keep them all from like taking the country to war? Well, you kind of have to mislead them a little bit. And so I think when Trump gets up there and he says stuff like, we're going to overthrow the Cuban government, it kind of scratches an itch for a lot of these people. So they think, oh yeah, Trump's got this. Like we saw what Trump did to Maduro. We saw what Trump did to Iran last year. Like FAFO, like Trump's going to do it. We got it. So yeah, like I think that Trump is engaging in a little bit of deception there because he's misleading them. He's leading them to believe that he's going to do the thing that they want him to do, which is start a war, start a conflict, at the very least to overthrow a government so that there's a power vacuum. And in that power vacuum, these people presumably have like networks already on the ground in the country ready to step up and seize power, right? You would think. The CIA certainly does, I would assume. I would assume they have those plans in place in every single country in the world at any given moment. So, like I think Trump is working against those kind of contingencies at all times, which is, again, why I give him the grace to engage in deception, because it's not just like he's not communicating with the public and quote unquote lying to the public just to lie to the public to wake up the normies. That's not what Trump's doing. He's putting out deception in his messaging because he is misleading the enemies that are operating all around him who want to push him into war, right? Okay, so before we make our way to Iran, let's make a few pit stops. I saw something that was wild, and I want to see if it's true. I kind of like saw it in passing. Just give me a second, because this is one that'll just take a second to cover. This is not a big one. Let me just pull this one up. Seems like X has like changed up their formatting, and this is really weird. Very strange that X has changed up some of its formatting, but it's fine. Here it is. Okay. So let's pull the chat back up. What's up, chat? How are y'all doing? Okay, so I saw this from like some random account, but because of the stuff that because of the weird places I go on the internet, on like X and stuff, like Arab Twitter and Africa Twitter, I end up getting a lot of content pushed into my feed that are from like Burkina Faso and the Congo and like places like that. So I always get these like random accounts. Like it says New Direction Africa, which I'm not following currently, but maybe I will start following them. It says New Direction Africa. It has like 40,000 followers, but it says U.S. diplomat to Burkina Faso sentenced for child rape, 18 months. The victims were a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old. He served his country. They served his pleasure. Now he serves 18 months, parole eligible in 15 years. The family is devastated. The politicians are outraged. The sentence is done. This is Western degeneracy on full display, and they still have the nerve to lecture the world about morality. Share it before they bury this too. Now normally like something like this, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there about Burkina Faso that I see posted every single day. That's formatted something like this with no source, like no sauce, nothing like that. And I always ignore that stuff because it's silly. It's like total clickbait. This, however, they have a screenshot of a document, the United States Department of Justice, and it says February 26th, 2026, former American embassy employee sentenced for the rape of minors in Burkina Faso. So let's go to the U.S. Department of Justice website and let's look this up. Let's do this together as a group and see if we can find it. Because there's a chance that this is all just nonsense. Like I just saw this like right before we went live, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Let's just see if that's true. But I didn't have time to validate it before we actually went live. If it is true, I mean, we want to look into it. But yeah, I don't know. This is how about this? Let's go to ChatGPT. There's a few different ways we can do this. We'll ask 3 different sources. So we will go to Grok and we will say, is this true? And we'll give them that link. We'll go to ChatGPT and we'll say, is this true? And we'll give them the link. And then we will just do our own research on the criminal division of the Department of Justice. And I'm trying to see what's the exact agency that's cited in this image. It says US it says justice.gov/news. Justice.gov/news. Oh, wow. It is real. All right, here it is. Look at that. Huh. Okay, so it says former American embassy employee sentenced for rape of minors in Burkina Faso. Now, the reason for those who are new to the show that I'm covering this is because Burkina Faso is a place that I've taken enormous interest in because of the leadership role they are playing in the rebellion against the UN and the unipolar hegemony of the United Nations and the globalist construct. Them, Mali, and Niger make up the Alliance of Sahel states. So it says a Maryland man was sentenced today to life in prison for forcibly sexually assaulting 2 minor girls in Burkina Faso in 2022 and 2023. After a 2-week trial in October 2025, a federal jury in the District of Maryland convicted Fodi Satifa Mera, 41, of 4 counts of aggravated sexual abuse of a minor, as well as 1 count each of attempted coercion and enticement of a minor and attempted obstruction of justice. Mera, a U.S. citizen, was an employee at the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou. And I know the chat's going to laugh at me for saying that. That's fine. Burkina Faso at the time of his offense, quote, the defendant, while representing the U.S. government abroad, violently sexually abused 2 acutely vulnerable child victims, said Assistant Attorney General A. Tyson Duva of the Justice Department's Criminal Division. Quote, his crimes were reprehensible. While no sentence could undo the harm he caused, today's outcome demonstrates that those who abuse children domestically or abroad will face significant consequences in the American justice system. We thank our partners at the U.S. State Department for helping us pursue justice for these victims. Quote, our message is clear. Those who prey on our children will pay a hefty price. Unless, of course, you have Israeli citizenship. I just want to point that out. Go watch the show we did with Ash last night, the Tuckabee and the Jews show. Will pay a hefty price, said U.S. Attorney Kelly O. Hayes for the District of Maryland. Mera targeted and abused 2 innocent young girls, and now he'll be behind bars for a long time where he belongs. We're committed to partnering with our community and law enforcement partners to ensure that justice is served by relentlessly pursuing and prosecuting predators who commit these deplorable acts. The quote, the Diplomatic Security Service, DSS, is committed to protecting the integrity of U.S. diplomatic missions and ensuring the safety of local communities where we serve, said Deputy Assistant Director George Simertsidis. These are some crazy names of the DSS Office of Special Investigations. We will thoroughly investigate any allegations of criminal conduct by those associated with U.S. diplomatic facilities and work tirelessly with our law enforcement partners to bring offenders to justice. This case demonstrates our unwavering commitment to accountability and the protection of the most vulnerable. Oh, this looks like this might get a little interesting. It says, quote, protecting children and safeguarding vulnerable populations from sexual exploitation and abuse is a core priority of the U.S. Agency for International Development Office of Inspector General, USAID OIG, and we will continue to pursue those who violate that trust wherever they operate, said Acting Deputy Assistant Director, Inspector General, wow, that is a mouthful, for investigations, Laura Russo of USAID OIG. With continued oversight jurisdiction over foreign assistance, USAID OIG will ensure significant consequences for perpetrators, holding accountable anyone who exploits their overseas positions, including individuals employed by the United States, aid organizations, or the United Nations. Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, special agents in Maryland, with assistance from federal law enforcement partners, demonstrated exceptional dedication and professionalism in bringing justice for the victims in this case, said Acting Executive Director John Condon of HSI. Their relentless pursuit of the facts and commitments to protecting vulnerable children across the world exemplifies HSI's mission to investigate crimes that threaten the safety and security of our communities at home and abroad. HSI remains steadfast in its efforts to combat child exploitation and ensure that those who harm children are held fully accountable. I commend our agents for their outstanding work and unwavering dedication to uphold the values of justice and integrity. Says, according to court documents and evidence presented at trial, Mara, on multiple occasions, forcibly raped two teenage Burkinabe girls at his embassy-leased residence in Ouagadougou. Because the residence was reserved for use by U.S. diplomatic personnel, it fell under the United States jurisdiction for prosecution. The previous resident of Mara's residence had developed a relationship with the minor victims and their family, providing them with nourishment and safety. The minor victims lived in abject poverty in a structure without running water, a short distance from what became Mara's residence. When Mara arrived, he saw opportunity and immediately capitalized on his access to the victims. Mara repeatedly sexually abused them for approximately 1 year, beginning when the victims were 13 and 15 years old. He used the girls' mother's life-threatening illness as an opportunity to demand sex, telling them that he could not help them without receiving something in return. Mara provided the girls with phones so he could summon them while his wife was away at work. Mara also was also convicted for sending sexually enticing messages to one of the minor victims and for attempting to persuade his housekeeper to lie to U.S. investigators to help him conceal his crimes. What a scumbag. So I need to know more about this guy. So obviously so it sounds like this guy's predecessor had established a relationship with these girls and was whatever, giving them food. It doesn't sound like there was anything nefarious going on there. And then when he shows up, they probably show up to the house wondering if there's going to be more food. And the guy's like, oh, look at this. I'm a predator. I'm a spider. And look at these little flies that have wandered into my web. What a scumbag. I hope they put this guy in prison for a very long time. What was his sentence? How many years? Life in prison. Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Fodi Mara. So obviously this guy was appointed by the Biden administration. Let's see. Let's learn about this scumbag. So now they're publishing articles about it. Now it's in the past few hours. Interesting. I mean, it just broke yesterday, but it doesn't say anything about who appointed them. But I mean, if it was 2022, it was obviously Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden had to appoint him. Yeah, Biden's not even mentioned in this article. Disgraceful. What an absolute scumbag. Absolute scumbag. All right. So I think we can put a pin in that one. Mara is in prison for life. Good riddance. Nobody will miss you. All right. So now we can go to. So there's two. Let's go to Russia first. Let's go to Russia. So Russia, there's a lot of interesting things happening with Russia. Pull up my take on the news brief. So Russia, there is a nuclear threat now that Putin is accusing France and the UK of giving the Zelensky government nukes in telling them to use them against Russia. And then there's also this pipeline sabotage plot. So there are two narratives. The third one, of course, is this attack that Ukraine did deep into Russian territory, and that was against using a long-range missile against a plant that was a very, very important production facility for Russia. And that is this article. Okay, so BBC satellite image shows damage to Russian missile factory after Ukraine strike. Satellite images show extensive damage to a Russian missile plant after a long-range nuclear strike or Ukrainian strike. I'm sorry. This is really weird how they have this thing set up. Ukrainian strike on Russian missile plant is significant but not critical, experts say. We've been reporting today on satellite imagery showing significant damage after a Ukrainian strike to a Russian industrial facility reportedly used for manufacture of the Iskander ballistic missiles frequently used against targets in Ukraine. Miko Varendik from the military intelligence team of the defense intelligence company Janes told BBC verify the Vontinsk plant is likely of great importance to Russia's ballistic missile production. However, while the strike was significant, it does not appear to have been critical. The Iskander missiles manufactured here are an important weapon in Russia's military arsenal because they are very hard to intercept and can be armed with both conventional and potentially nuclear payloads. Okay, so there is some analysis that I want to listen to, that I want to share with y'all. And that would be from Scott Ritter. And the reason I would turn to Scott Ritter for this is because his background is like damage assessment. Like he would do damage assessment, I think, for the intelligence community after like missile strikes. So like missiles and missile damage, that's all his wheelhouse, right? So let me pull up that exact video, which is this one.
Undeclared wars are commonplace.
Okay.
Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war,
Let me skip
otherwise
ahead
known as
to
aggression,
the part
with no
that I'm looking
complaints
for.
from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with the illegitimate use of force.
Excuse me. Got that screwed up there. Let's try that one more time.
Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with.
Ukraine became a member of NATO, that we would station long-range strike missile capability on Ukrainian soil. You see, it's a fist right in the stomach of Russia. Look at the map. It's sticking right there. And if you have American missiles right there, we strike deeper into the Soviet or Russian interior than it could be imagined. In places like Volatile, the most important ballistic missile production facility in Russia, bar none, become vulnerable now to attack. This is why the Russians put draft treaties out there in December of 2021 and said, Putin said directly to Biden, you can't put missiles on Ukrainian soil. And the United States refused to endorse that conclusion. Then after the special military operation, the Scalp missile, the Storm Shadow, the American ATACMS were provided, but the Russians said, you can't strike the Russian interior. And when we started talking about that in the fall of 2024, as you recall, we almost went to nuclear war. The Russians said, if you allow ATACMS to strike into the deep, we will hit you back hard. Nuclear weapons are on the table. The CIA believed that, greater than 50% chance of nuclear war. They briefed the United States Congress. We were saved only by then candidate Trump, who said, I won't allow this to happen when I'm president. But then he turns around and talks about giving tomahawks, and the Russians said, if you do that, nukes are on the table. Nukes are on the table. That's how serious this is. So the Flamingo is a workaround. The Flamingo is a missile built by the British, using components that could be called Ukrainian, using old aircraft engine that were built in the Motor Siege plant in Zaporizhia. Over 16,000 of these were built over time. Many are still available, can be refurbished. a simple design based upon an old Tupolev 163 drone, but it's been now repurposed to be a strike. German guidance systems, American intelligence going into the German guidance systems. And they have this Flamingo missile. And it flies to 1,400, 1,500 kilometers. It could possibly even go longer. Deep strike capability, similar to the Tomahawk. And now it's being used to strike these targets. If Putin's deal was accepted today, it means that Ukraine, which calls itself the first army of Europe, Europe's shield against Russia, it is identified as a NATO proxy.
Right.
Ukraine would have NATO-linked long-range strike missile capability on its soil. This would be a strategic defeat for Russia. Which is why the Flamingo is now one of these weapon systems that is going to define the outcome of this war, because now with Flamingo, the Russians can't stop the fight.
All right,
for a deal.
let's back up, because he's talking about nuclear. Scott Ritter fearmongers over nuclear attacks like all the time, so I don't really put a lot of stock into that. I want to know about this specific attack, so let's jump to this part.
And they made the concessions they believed the United States was insisting on for a deal. And then Donald Trump turned around and just started negotiating that away.
Right. How did the Kremlin view the attack on one of its most significant munitions plants by the British missile Flamingo under the guidance of American intel?
There is overwhelming silence coming out of Russia about this. There was initial local reporting that confirmed the strike. I've been in contact with people in Badlands who have confirmed the strike. So we know the strike took place. We know the attack happened. But, Judge, the ramifications of this attack are extreme, and nobody wants to acknowledge what this attack meant. The Russians have always been concerned about Ukraine. I try to remind people, and I'll just give a brief history lesson, but the United States has been looking to use Ukraine as a tool to bring down the Soviet Union and Russia since 1948, when the CIA began Operation Red Sox, dropping in, trained paramilitary operatives to organize resistance or join up with the Banderas who were still fighting in an effort to kill a lot of Soviets and to destabilize the Soviet Union. We did that up until 1953, and then we realized that we had been beaten. But then the CIA continued to fund the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists all the way through 1990. And the U.S. Special Forces, there's a plan that's been declassified where the U.S. Special Forces are talking about sending Special Forces teams into Ukraine in case of a war to break Ukraine away from the Soviet Union. We've always been trying to do that, to use Ukraine as a tool. And one of the ways that the Russians feared is if Ukraine became a member of NATO, that we would station long-range strike missile capability on Ukrainian soil. You see, it's a fist right in the stomach of Russia. Look at the...
So that's where we had started it originally. Yeah, so this is interesting. So he went on to explain that this Flamingo missile, assembled by the British, but using Ukrainian-made parts, I suppose the purpose of that is so that they can deny involvement. I don't really know what the point of that is. That they're putting it together using like old aircraft parts from Ukraine. That seems really silly, but okay. That's really strange. So the other story that we have, again, we have three stories here on the Russia-Ukraine front. So the first was that one. That was a pretty big deal. Like Russia's pretty pissed off about that, and you could certainly understand why. We also have this story, which is the nuclear one. So this is from 3 days ago. Moscow warns against plot to arm Kyiv with nukes. British and French leaders have lost touch with reality, Russia's envoy told the UN Security Council. Russia has warned France and the UK that alleged plots to provide Kyiv with nuclear capabilities could trigger severe global consequences, accusing the Western European powers at the UN Security Council of pursuing a dangerous escalation in the Ukraine conflict. Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzia, accused Kiev's European backers on Tuesday of openly prioritizing Moscow's strategic defeat while derailing any prospects for peace in Ukraine. The envoy pointed to an emergency statement issued earlier by Russia's foreign intelligence services, alleging that the UK and France are considering transfers of components, technology, or equipment, enabling Kiev to develop either a nuclear device or a dirty bomb. Quote, such plans are not only irresponsible and dangerous, but also a direct violation of Article 1 of the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. That is why the authors of this escapade seek to portray Kiev's acquisition of nuclear weapons as Ukraine's own development, Nebenzia said. Nebenzia said Moscow views the alleged plot as evidence that British and French leaders, sidelined from the U.S.-led Ukraine settlement process, have completely lost touch with reality. Quote, Russia possesses all necessary means to respond to such developments. However, we hope that there are still enough sane and reasonable people in London and Paris who will be able to restrain their leaders from such inadequate steps. And I would extend that to Washington as well. I mean, Trump's the one calling the shots, and he's not going to lead us into a war that gets us snagged up. But there are still plenty of ways for bad actors to throw wrenches in the process and push us into a situation where war is inevitable, right? I mean, they're already saying war is inevitable. War is going to happen. We're going to do war. It's like, it's a stupid thing to say if you're actually planning on going to war, in my opinion. But okay. Here's Medvedev saying Moscow will respond if NATO gives nukes to Nazi regime in Kyiv. France and UK are considering covertly handing nuclear capabilities or a dirty bomb. Medvedev says, Russia would launch a nuclear response if NATO countries supplied atomic weapons to Ukraine. Former President Dmitry Medvedev has warned. Medvedev, who now serves as deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, was commenting to RT on Tuesday on claims by Russia's foreign intelligence services that London and Paris are considering ways to provide nuclear weaponry or related components to Kyiv. Quote, I will be blunt and state the obvious, Medvedev said, adding that the reported intention by the UK and France to hand over nuclear capabilities to the, quote, Nazi regime in Kyiv, end quote, would change the situation entirely. Quote, this is a direct transfer of nuclear weapons to a country at war, he stated. According to the SVR, British and French officials are weighing the covert transfer of relevant European-made components, equipment, and technologies to Ukraine and preparing an information campaign to portray any resulting capability as domestically developed. Quote, there should be no doubt whatsoever that in such a scenario, Russia would be forced to use any means at its disposal, including non-strategic nuclear weapons, against targets in Ukraine that threaten our country, Medvedev stated. And if necessary, against the supplier nations now implicated in a nuclear conflict with Russia. This is the kind of symmetrical response that the Russian Federation would be entitled to. He added. Now, the funny part is, I haven't checked, but the funny part is the Western media, which is dishonest as hell, would look at this statement and say, Medvedev is warning to bomb, is going to bomb the United States. Medvedev is 100% right. Not only would Russia be entitled, like would be perfectly, they would be, what's the word? Justified in firing a nuke at Kyiv if this actually happened. They would be justified in firing missiles. I don't know about nuclear, but they'd be justified in firing missiles at Britain and France. Now, the more reasonable, measured response, in my opinion, would be an assassination campaign against all the people involved. That might take too much time. That might require too much intelligence. That might be too messy. So it's easier just to blow up the whole building and kill everybody inside. I get that. Like, this is war, you know? I mean, if you're deploying nukes at that point, you're kind of at a point where there is no hope for anything else. Now, is this like just a nuclear scare event? It could be. But for whatever reason, man, these people, these psychopaths in London and Paris, and I would say DC as well, are like hell-bent on not giving up Ukraine. And you have to wonder what the hell is going on in Ukraine. There is something here where they have fought wars, the proxy wars with Russia before. We've covered them on the Book of Trump. Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine in 2014. Although Putin technically started that one after the coup, the Maidan coup. Number of other ones. There are a number of other examples of them trying to start Afghanistan in the 70s, right? When they lose the war, like when the war is lost, they just abandon the project. They leave the place that they were using as their puppet to fester and to face the consequences alone of their actions. And then they move on to their next plot, right? This represents a different development in that dynamic because they're not going to give up that easy. Like they're basically going to go down swinging. Like it's almost like they view this as their final opportunity, their last opportunity to fight Russia. Like if it's now or never. If we don't throw everything we have at Russia right now, we're never going to get this chance ever again. That's what it feels like now. That's what this feels like. This development feels like that. Yeah, so that is certainly an interesting development. We'll keep an eye on that. And then the third story, so I mentioned there were 3 Russian stories, is this one. From 3 days ago as well. Is this? I think this was the same day as Nabinzio was explaining, was it to the UN about the nuclear plot? Putin was giving a press conference or a speech during a meeting at the Federal Security Services, the FSB board in Moscow, where he said that they were aware of a foreign Black Sea gas pipeline sabotage plot. It says Moscow has learned about plans to bomb the Turk Stream and Blue Stream pipelines. The Russian president has said Russia is aware of plans to attack trans-Black Sea gas pipelines, the Turk Stream and the Blue Stream. President Vladimir Putin has said the plot is aimed at jeopardizing the peace process to end the Ukraine conflict, according to the president. Putin made the remarks on Tuesday at a meeting of the Federal Security Service board, adding that intelligence on plans to attack our gas systems under the Black Sea was obtained. Quote, they simply cannot calm down. They don't know what else to do to derail the Ukraine peace process in the attempt to reach a settlement through diplomatic means. They are doing everything to stage some kind of provocation and end everything that has been so carefully achieved on this negotiation track, he said. Putin did not attribute the alleged plot to any party, saying it would be discussed during the closed door part of the FSB board meeting. Gas and oil infrastructure, that's so like odious. That's very, very ominous. Like he's telling the enemy, we know what you're going to do. I'll give the details when we go behind closed doors, like when we plan our response, but we know what y'all are doing. Okay, so it says gas and oil infrastructure in the Black Sea have repeatedly come under Ukrainian attacks amid the conflict between Moscow and Kyiv. The attacks involve long-range UAV strikes against various facilities ashore, as well as repeated attempts to target Russian naval vessels patrolling the pipelines with sea drones. Last October, FSB Chief Alexander Bortnikov warned that Ukraine and the UK were jointly preparing an attack on Turk Stream. London and Kiev have also been plotting attacks on other critical infrastructure sites in Russia using sea and aerial drones, as well as saboteur divers, Bortnikov said at the time. The September 2022 bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline in the Baltic Sea is the largest scale attack on underwater energy infrastructure in modern history. While the theory that it was carried out by a group of Ukrainian divers has become mainstream in the West, Moscow has been skeptical about that version, suggesting instead that Western state actors may have had a hand in the sabotage. Did you notice how that, like, the pattern there, that with the nuclear thing, the Russians are saying, yeah, the British and the French are going to give dirty bombs to Kiev, but they're going to put the narrative out there that Kiev developed this stuff all on their own. Same thing here. Yeah, so then you have let's see, Alexander McKay who I think he's just a pundit. He says that the plot to hand Kiev nukes aims at derailing peace talks. Yeah, obviously. Um, yeah. So real quick, let's just look at the maps here because we talked about this on Monday when we did the Maidan coup on Book of Trump. Remember during after the Orange Revolution, one of the fallouts of the Orange Revolution of 2004, we learned a few weeks ago, was this energy crisis in 2006, where you basically had these Western oligarchs, these Western powers, trying to put their thumb on the scale and screw up the gas negotiations between Russia and its client partners in Europe. And that's what led to Putin deciding, you know what, we're gonna need other like channels to sell oil, to sell energy, gas to Europe. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna build these other pipelines. And so here's the map. I believe I put it right. Where did I put it? Where did I put that map? Right there. There it is. Okay. So you have these are the pipelines that are going through Ukraine, right? And so those basically like the negotiations here, because the West had control over some of these companies that were negotiating on the Ukraine side, they were screwing up the contracts that the relationships that were between Russia and Ukraine to, the middlemen, like to sell the oil the gas from Russia to Europe. So what Putin decided to do is he said, you know what, we're going to build some new pipelines. We're going to build a pipeline in the Baltic called Nord Stream, and then we're going to build a pipeline in the Black Sea called Turk Stream. And then I guess they added another one called Blue Stream, which goes straight to Turkey. And this way we can continue to sell gas to Europe through alternative routes should things with Ukraine get really hairy. Well, they blew up Nord Stream back in September of 2022. And now apparently they're trying to blow up both the Turk Stream and the Blue Stream. And that's really interesting because that would cut off gas primarily to Turkey, but also obviously to like the Balkans and the rest of Europe. This is interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, so real quick, because only got about 10 minutes left. I want to do Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then I want to finish out with Iran. Looks like we just had a story break. I'm just seeing this as I'm pulling up RT. Says mass graves discovered in the DR Congo. More than 170 bodies have been in two neighborhoods near the city of Uvira in South Kyiv. The province's governor has said 171 bodies have been discovered as a mass grave in eastern DR Congo in an area recently held by M23 rebels. That's tragic. I'm just trying to see if there's any other pertinent information. Yeah, so it looks like this is all related to the fighting that's been going on there. I just didn't know if it was going to mention that the former, there's those stories that were out there that the former DR Congo president, what's his name? Joseph Kabila, that he was killed in a strike. And I just didn't know if they're going to be like, oh yeah, we found Joseph Kabila's body. Still haven't gotten any update on that. I don't know if Joseph Kabila is dead or alive, but you would think if he was alive, they would have come out and said it, but maybe not. Maybe he wants people to think he's dead. Who knows? Okay, so let's go now to Pakistan. So we have... Oh, you know what? I forgot that I just realized looking through my tabs, I do have this big story that just broke today. I'm torn right now. All right. Well, I'll just explain what's going on with Pakistan and Afghanistan, like the high level, and maybe we'll go deeper on it because we only have 10 minutes left anyway. Maybe we'll go deeper on both of these on Tuesday. But it says blasts rock Kabul as Pakistan and Afghanistan exchange strikes. Islamabad launched airstrikes on Afghan facilities hours after the Taliban carried out its own retaliatory attack. Multiple explosions shook the Afghan capital, Kabul, and several other regions early Friday morning as Pakistan and Afghanistan exchanged military strikes over their volatile border, accusing each other of escalating the conflict. Islamabad launched Operation Ghazab Lil Haq, which is the Wrath of Justice, hours after Afghan forces conducted cross-border attacks against Pakistani military positions. Residents of the Afghan capital reported hearing at least 3 blasts, but authorities have not confirmed the precise locations of the explosions. Quote, the cowardly Pakistani military has carried out airstrikes in certain areas of Kabul, Kandahar, and Paktia. Fortunately, there have been no reported casualties. Taliban government spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid wrote on X. So my understanding is that I think Saudi's already come out and said they're not going to get involved, even though they signed that security agreement with Pakistan. It's like an Article 5. And basically, sounds like what they're saying is that security agreement is really about India and Israel. Like, those are really the two concerns. Like, if Israel attacks Saudi, Pakistan comes running. If India attacks Pakistan, Saudi comes running. But if it's anybody else, you're kind of on your own. It's a little troubling to see this. I want to get more information on this particular story because Trump is a big fan of Pakistan. He's a big fan of the Pakistan prime minister, as is MBS. I have found that the Pakistan government officials, the stuff they've said over the past year has been very based. The stuff they've talked about, the history of terrorism in the region, the sourcing of it, all of it seems pretty transparent, like the way they're talking about it. And then, of course, the Talibros. Like, we love the Talibros here. The Talibros are based. The Talibros shut down the opium trade, right? They cut off the Sackler family's source of opium. That's why I suspect Trump gave them all that military equipment when we left Bagram in August of 2021. So don't really know what to make of this. Like, let's wait and see. Let's get some more information. They're saying nobody died. So let's wait and see what comes of that. And so that gives us time to make a real quick pit stop with the New York Times. In Saudi Arabia. See, I don't ever go on this website because it's cancer as far as I'm concerned. And this is why. Look at this headline. I'm so used to gay tragedies that I almost missed romance. I don't even know what to make of that headline. I thought this story I'm pulling up, I was under the impression. I don't want to pull up like a clickbait Twitter post. I want to pull up the actual article. Surprised this isn't on like the front page. Here it is. Okay. Yep. There's a paywall. Of course there is. Scumbags. All right. So how a call. Wait a minute. They're acting like this has not been archived yet. So I'm going to have to archive it myself. All right. Well, while we're doing that, I guess we can pull up one of the clickbait. I don't know if I would describe this particular account as clickbait. They put out decent stuff. U.S. drop site. Where is it? Right. Here it is. Okay, so a November phone call from President Trump. This is like coming from the New York Times, but they're just consolidating it into a post. It says a November phone call from President Trump detonated a quiet rivalry between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the New York Times reported. So what I find interesting about this, the timing of this and the and everything, this is a development that I've been tracking for a few months now. I haven't really talked about it because I wasn't really sure what to make of it. Like I was like, is this just like the media trying to make something out of nothing? Like, is this an actual thing? Is this kayfabe? Like, what is it? This like growing rivalry rift between MBS, the Saudis, and the Emiratis. And now that I've seen like footage of the Saudis talking about it openly, like the diplomats, it definitely is something. Like to what extent it's actually a rift, to what extent they're actually in opposition to one another, we'll find out. But the question for me was always like, all right, well, like what started all of this? Because these were close allies. So now the New York Times is reporting that there was a phone call in November from President Trump that screwed all this up. It says, according to 4 people briefed by Emirati officials, that's a very sketchy, weird sourcing, by the way. Trump told UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had asked him during a White House visit. That was the one where, you had the horse-drawn carriages and the planes flying overhead. To impose U.S. sanctions on the Emirates over its alleged support for Sudan's Rapid Support Forces. 2 of those briefed said Trump warned that his friends were out to get him. MBZ's friends were out to get him, but assured the Emirati leader he has his back. So, like, let's just assume that, like, that's true. Like, that exchange actually happened. I can look at it 2 different ways. 3 different ways. Number 1, like, this is all earnest. Like, Trump's being serious. Hey, people are out to get you. I have your back. Okay. I could see it as this is kayfabe, like Trump saying, hey, your friends, MBS and the Saudis are out to get you. But don't worry, I have your back. Like, I'm your guy, right? Like, that's Trump winning ostensibly trying to win the support and the loyalty of MBZ, which I think he already had, in my opinion. Like, remember, the MBZ and the South and the Emiratis are the ones who put Jared Kushner in touch with MBS in the first place, right? They're the ones who like brought MBS around DC and introduced him to everyone. And we're like, hey, this is the guy. This guy's going to be a big deal. Y'all should get to know him. So this doesn't make a lot of sense. However, the X factor here is Israel, because UAE and Israel are close allies, and that this is becoming like very obvious. Like, they're pushing this to the very surface right now. And so I wonder, like, to what extent that plays into this. A U.S. official told the NYT that MBS never asked Trump to sanction the UAE. A Saudi official also disputed the claim, saying that the prince sought sanctions on the Sudanese paramilitary itself, not the Emirates. So there's a really good chance that this is all just being put out as like fake news by the New York Times to drive division between Trump and his Arab partners. That would be my guess. My guess is that's what this is. That this is Israeli Mossad efforts to drive a wedge between Trump and the Muslims, because they don't like the fact that Trump and the Muslims are becoming so tight, and the Muslims are now becoming like the power center in the Middle East. We have a map here that is let's take a look at this map. We're going to end up going over for a few minutes. We probably aren't even going to get to Iran. We'll just have to like look at the headline. That is right here. Okay, so you can see this looks like an incomplete map, I think. It says, okay, hatched countries are in civil war with various actors backing local proxies, shading based on assessment of alignment regarding Red Sea related issues, which are not absolute or indicators of bilateral relations. Okay, so they're saying there's Team Red and Team Blue. Team Blue, what they're saying, like with the darkest blue being like the most loyal supporters, right? And then the lighter blue being like fringe actors. And so that would be Team Blue is Israel, UAE, Somaliland, which is this little area right here. It's not a real country, but Israel has recognized it as a real country. Ethiopia. And it's very telling, by the way, that who put this together? Liam Carr from the Critical Threats Project at the American Enterprise Institute. Hey, Liam Carr. One second. Critical threats. Where have I heard critical threats before? Critical threats, critical threats, critical threats. So here's Liam Carr. You know where I've heard critical threats before? Critical threats is a pro-Israel outlet. I'm almost positive. Almost positive. Oh, and look, their report from today covers the DRC and the Sahel. That's interesting. So they say, I just want to read this real quick. It says the DR Congo, Congolese army and allied militias launched a coordinated offensive against Rwandan-backed M23 rebels in North Kivu province and eliminated the senior M23 military leader in its most significant drone strike on the group's leadership since early 2024. Okay. And it says in the Sahel, Russia is increasing Africa Corps' deployment. That would be the Wagner Group. Deployments in the Sahel, partially due to the failure of Russian forces to degrade the strengthening Salafi jihadi insurgencies, which has left their partners increasingly vulnerable and in need of greater regime security. Yeah, then he talks about like different countries shutting down their borders, Chad being one of them. Okay. And then, yeah, and it gives a bigger breakdown here. That's fine. But we also had Burkina Faso jailing, that reminds me, General Domino. I did see that. Because Togo like expelled him, and then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I just saw, and it could be one of those things where like it's just being regurgitated, but it was Burkina Faso jails General Domino. Maybe not. Nothing's coming up in the search. It does say that General Diandere has been jailed, but that's from he was convicted back in 2019. So that is different. But anyway, if that story is real, we will talk about it on Tuesday. And maybe we'll talk more about this. But critical threats. That's I feel like I've read through this before, and I want to say my takeaway from it was, let's just do a little digging on this. The project. What is the project? Okay, Frederick. It's directed by Frederick Kagan. There we go. Frederick Kagan. Now, Frederick Kagan, are you related to, I don't know, Robert Kagan? Or I'm sorry. You're related to Donald Kagan. So Frederick Kagan, scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Ha 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 ha. His brother is Robert Kagan. I knew it. Just had that instinct, man. So, and if y'all don't know, for those who don't know who Robert Kagan is, let me just side quest. Robert Kagan, this clown right here, is the husband to Victoria Nuland. So Robert Kagan is married to Victoria Nuland, right? Right. Robert Kagan was a columnist for the Washington Post. He was like the guy in 2016 who was crushing Trump, like leading the whole like misinformation psyop against Trump. He's a neocon, right? He's a neocon. So he's like, oh, I'm a Republican, but he's like totally pro-war and all that bullshit. He was deputy national security advisor to Dick Cheney. But he also worked in the Obama administration. So that kind of tells you everything, right? He also worked in the Reagan administration. So like that kind of connects everything. And he co-founded the Project for the New American Century with Bill Kristol in 1997. And one of the first things they did through the work of the PNAC from 1998 Kagan was an early and strong advocate of military action in Syria, Iran, Afghanistan, as well as to, quote, remove Mr. Hussein and his regime from power. You may recall that became a official policy position of the Republican Party of the U.S. government under the Republican Party in October of 1998. That was a law they signed into the law or whatever. And he's a Carnegie Endowment for International Peace Fellow. Yeah, this guy, Brookings Institute, this guy is about as deep state as they come. So his brother is Frederick Kagan, the guy who founded Critical Threat. I knew it. I knew Critical Threats was a deep state outlet. Just has that feel to it, right? It's an impressive website. I mean, it's a well-made website. But yeah, I don't really need to look any further. When Liam Carr is the one pushing this crap, and now I have to back myself out. What even got me down this rabbit hole to begin with? I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was this map. It was this map that was made by Liam Carr for that report, which talked about putting all these different alliances in place. Yeah, this is neocon. Dude, this is an op by the neocons. I'm almost certain. So my kind of knee-jerk take, my instinct is that this is some kind of an op that's being run against the UAE and the Saudis. And now I think, I'm speculating, but I think that MBS and MBZ and Trump are running their own op against the neocons. And they're both, it's like a cat and mouse game that's happening right now. And I can't quite make sense of it fully, but that's just what it feels like to me. It makes no sense that these guys would be actually fighting one another right now. So here's Liam Carr's X account, and he's he's putting out maps to show how this whole thing's happening, how Africa and the Middle East are now forming these coalitions that are going to fight one another. So because they couldn't get the Arabs to all fight Iran, now they're going to try to get the Arabs to fight Arabs with Africans mixed in. And oh yeah, by the way, they got the Indians involved now too, because Modi was in Israel this past week and went and spoke at the Knesset. He talked about how India is Israel and they're all one and the same. And yeah, it's we'll get into Modi's visit to the Knesset on Tuesday. But yeah, here is his visit to the Knesset, and I believe they gave him a medal, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there is some sort of a medal given to him, so whatever. But yeah, India and Israel and the UAE are in some sort of alliance, while Saudi, Pakistan, and certain African countries are in another alignment. And yeah, we'll kind of unpack that whole thing. The last thing I'll say just about the Iran stuff, because it's worth noting, strikes on Iran wouldn't drag U.S. into another forever war. This is from Vance. I just saw this broke. This is reported, I think, while we were live, or maybe a few minutes before we went live. People should not overlearn from mistakes made with past foreign interventions, the U.S. Vice President has cautioned. In an interview with the Washington Post on Thursday, deep state outlet, Vance addressed concerns regarding another protracted forever war. Quote, the idea that we're going to be in the Middle East war for years with no end in sight, there's no chance that will happen, he said, describing himself as a skeptic of foreign military interventions. Excuse me. I do think that we have to avoid repeating mistakes of the past. I also think we have to avoid overlearning the lessons of the past. Just because one president screwed up a military conflict doesn't mean we can never engage in military conflict again. I agree with that. But I also think that Iran has made it very clear that if you do anything to us, we're going to go all out and we're going to attack everything you have and throw everything we have at you. And again, telegraphing this message to Iran that, hey, even if we attack Iran, we're only going to stick around there for a few minutes and then we're going to leave the Middle East. You're basically just telling Iran, hey, if you can just hold on for a few weeks, maybe a few months, that's it. That's all this war is ever going to be. Again, not a very good thing to be telegraphing to your potential enemy in a war. I don't think the war is going to happen. And finally, where I'm going to land it, I was saving this one for last. was this article. U.S.-Iran talks conclude with claims of progress, but few details. So we're getting more mixed messaging out of this the Geneva meeting from yesterday, and we'll get more information over the weekend. So maybe we'll talk about it on Tuesday. But official, like mediators and stuff, are saying significant progress was made. It sounds like the Iranians are happy, right? So they're going to meet in Vienna next week. Trump came out and said that he wasn't happy. He told the reporters he wasn't happy, but that's Trump being Trump. I think Trump is just playing games. Like that's the art of the deal, right? But the real article that I wanted to announce was this. No, it's not that. It was. Did Ash not include it in the? I guess Ash did not include it in the news brief take, so I'm gonna have to pull it from the news brief from my own files. Hold on. Nobody wants to talk about this. I don't know why. Iran may dangle a commercial bonanza to woo Trump, according to the Financial Times of London. Tehran is reportedly weighing oil, gas, and mining incentives as part of nuclear talks to avert escalation. Iran is weighing economic incentives to entice U.S. President Donald Trump as nuclear negotiations with Washington continue, the Financial Times has reported. Talks in Geneva on Thursday mark a third round of indirect U.S.-Iran contacts, using Omani mediation at a time when Washington is simultaneously amassing military assets in the Middle East to increase pressure on Tehran. People familiar with the matter told the Financial Times on Thursday that Tehran is considering pitching a potential commercial bonanza to Washington involving oil, gas, and mining projects, but has yet to make any formal offer. A senior U.S. official told the outlet that no such proposals have been discussed. And it says, quote, Iran is looking at Venezuela as a case study, one source said, referring to Trump's push for U.S. companies to secure oil deals in the Latin American country after U.S. forces kidnapped President Nicolas Maduro last month. So what is my takeaway from all this? I've been saying this for a while, but I think that what's going to end up coming out of this is they're going to say war. And then we're going to get this announcement that we're doing this major economic trade deal with Iran, where we're going to build them a nuclear reactor. We're going to get rare earth minerals. We're going to get gas. We're going to get oil because they have a ton of oil there. It's going to be like a massive mutually beneficial economic trade deal. It's also, I mean, not only is it going to piss off like all the Zionists, like warmongers, but it's also going to be like a hallmark, a cornerstone of like world peace in the golden age. If the U.S. and Iran can make peace and engage in economic trade deals, then anybody can. And there's no reason that everybody should normalize. Everybody should get along. There shouldn't be any more like real conflict. I mean, there will be conflict, but there shouldn't be existential conflict rather, right? So yeah, like that's how I think this all ends. That's my I could be totally wrong. Like maybe we end up bombing the hell out of Iran and killing 1 million people, and the Republicans will make jokes about it at their next foreign press dinner, like George Bush did 20 years ago, where he laughed about all the people who were dying in Iraq. Maybe that's what ends up happening. Who knows? I mean, we have a pretty cynical, awful government that seems to worship Satan. So you never know. But I tend to think that President Trump doesn't want to do that he doesn't want to kill 1 million people. And that's not what's going to happen. So that's what I think. All right, guys, let's hit the thumbs up, share the show. I'm going to do rants and boosts, and we're going to get out of here. Let's see. Oh, looks like we got a big crowd in here right now. What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Pour yourself a drink. Oh, Viva Frey. Viva Frey has rated the stream. Viva. Hey, man. Appreciate you, Viva. We were just talking about all kinds of... Yeah, Skeptical says, Ghost won't notice when he gets going. He won't get derailed by chat. Just a heads up. Well, shout out to Viva. Appreciate you, Viva. Viva Fry. Did I see Viva Fry? Viva Fry. Anyway, appreciate you, Viva. Yeah, so there's a boost that we're going to read. Anyone have any comments or questions in the chat, throw them in there. I'll go ahead and address. Please hit the thumbs up. If you're new here to the show, welcome. We like to talk about all kinds of stuff here. We cover every single topic there is to cover geopolitically. We talk about the militia wars happening in Africa. We were covering Maduro. We've been covering Maduro for like 2 years. Anything and everything. So obviously the Middle East, obviously Netanyahu, obviously Israel. We talk about all that stuff. So stick around, come back, hang out with us Tuesdays and Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern. And now we're going to go look at the Badlands boost. If you're listening to this on replay, you can leave a Rumble rant anytime. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost or click on the boost tab at the top of our website. And then you can, from the drop-down menu, select Geopolitics with Ghost. So we have a $100 boost from Ethel Mary. Ethel Mary, that is very generous of you. Thank you. Says, your knowledge and way of sharing it are a lifesaver for me. Thank you for the show and all the others you appear on. Very much appreciated. I always have a sense of hope after hearing you explain the whys and wheres. Love your maps. Well, thank you, Ethel. Yeah, we love maps here. We always do geography. We always talk about maps. And yeah, we like to leave hopefully we are putting hope in people's hearts, but that's not the purpose. We're not doing hopium. We're doing earnest analysis, but we're looking at it from a perspective that I think a lot of people are missing, if that makes sense. So appreciate you, Ethel. Hit the thumbs up, guys. It looks like the crash of Canada. Is Canada crashing? Because of Viva. Yeah, and we were covering Cuba earlier, so go back and take a look at Cuba. Yeah, guys, we will see you later. I'm going to be on the narrative on Sunday night with Burning Bright, so I will see you then. And then on Monday night on the Book of Trump, which is another show that I do, we are going to cover the Crimea War. So we did the Maidan coup this past week. Now we're going to do the Crimea War, and that's really going to set us up, I think, to get into the Trump administration 1.0 and what was actually happening as we get into that whole facet of it. So, yeah. All right, guys. Thanks again. Let's cue the music, and we will call it a day.
Everybody have a great weekend. Good job.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.